You know, when we hear the name Mughal, we immediately think of unbelievable power, stunning palaces, and just jaw-dropping wealth. But what if I told you that behind all that splendor was a family drama so intense, so full of ambition and betrayal that it nearly tore the entire empire apart?
Just look at the Red Fort in Delhi. I mean, even today, it's this massive symbol of the power wielded by the Mughal emperors. For generations, this was the very heart of an empire that stretched across almost the entire Indian subcontinent.
So here's the big question. How did the dynasty that created all of this come so close to absolutely destroying itself from the inside out? This isn't just a history lesson about armies and politics. No, this is a story about a family whose own rules about power basically guaranteed conflict. It set the stage for a brother to turn against brother, and ultimately, son to turn against his own father.
Now, to really get to the bottom of this, we have to ask a really basic question. Who were the Mughals anyway? And believe me, the answer is a lot more complicated than you might think.
You see, the Mughals had this kind of split personality when it came to their ancestors. On their mother's side, they were descended from the one and only Genghis Khan, the Mongol ruler. But here's the thing. They hated being called Mongols. The name was tied to all these horrific massacres, and they wanted nothing to do with it. But on their father's side, they were the successors of Timur, another famous conqueror who had actually sacked Delhi way back in 1398, and that they were incredibly proud of. They celebrated their Timurid roots all the time.
So, with this really complex identity, how in the world did they manage to build one of the most powerful empires on the planet? Well, the secret lies in a family tradition that was, strangely enough, both their greatest strength and their most fatal flaw.
Okay, so they didn't do what a lot of other monarchies did, where the oldest son gets everything, no questions asked. Nope, they followed a Timurid custom called co-parsonary inheritance. The idea was that the empire would be divided up between all the sons. Sounds fair, right? Well, in reality, it meant that every single prince grew up believing the entire throne was his for the taking. It was a recipe for disaster.
And this system created this predictable, violent pattern. You had Prince Selim, who would later become Emperor Jahangir, rebelling against his own famous father, Akbar. Then, years later, guess what? Jahangir's own son, a prince named Khurram, the man who would become the legendary Shah Jahan, rebelled against him. Rebellion wasn't some shocking event. For an ambitious Mughal prince, it was practically a rite of passage.
And when that very same rebellious Prince Khurram finally fought his way to the throne and became Shah Jahan, the empire hit its absolute peak. We're talking about a golden age of power and unbelievable splendor.
Under Shah Jahan, the Mughal armies just kept winning, pushing the empire's borders even further. Travelers from all over the world who came to visit, well, they were just blown away. They wrote about this fabled land of almost mythical wealth. To anyone looking from the outside, the Mughal Empire had never, ever looked stronger. But that shiny surface was hiding a very fragile core.
Because all that glitter, all that opulence that amazed the world, it was hiding some deep, really dangerous cracks in the foundation. It all came at a massive cost, one that just wasn't sustainable.
5.6%. What could this one little number possibly mean in an empire of millions and millions of people?
Well, the truth is sitting right there in the empire's own records. Get this, out of about 8,000 high-ranking officials, or nobles, a tiny group of just 445 men, that's the top 5.6%, were paid over 61% of the empire's entire income as their personal salaries. The inequality was just astronomical. Just stop and think about that for a second. Almost all of the empire's incredible wealth was going into the pockets of a handful of elites. And what about the millions of peasants and artisans, the very people actually producing all that wealth? Well, they were left with scraps. Most of them were living hand to mouth, just trying to get by. It created this huge, invisible foundation of poverty and resentment right underneath all that golden splendor.
And it was on top of this incredibly shaky foundation that the final, tragic chapter of Shah Jahan's rule would begin. All sparked by that same old, violent, family tradition of rebellion.
In 1657, Shah Jahan got sick, and everything just exploded. His 4 sons, who were all powerful governors in their own right, saw their chance. They dragged the entire empire into a vicious civil war, a chaotic, bloody free-for-all for their father's throne. And after about a year of brutal fighting, one son, the brilliant and absolutely ruthless Aurangzeb, came out on top.
The end was quick, and it was merciless.
Aurangzeb had his 3 brothers hunted down and executed, and Shah Jahan, the emperor who had rebelled to win his throne, the man who oversaw the empire's golden age, he was thrown in prison by his own son. He spent the rest of his life as a captive in Agra, a prisoner of the very system that he himself had used to rise to power.
The Mughal Empire did survive. In fact, under Aurangzeb, it grew even larger. But the price of that victory was just staggering. It really makes you wonder, what happens to an empire that's built on a system where a son has to defeat his father and kill his own brothers to rule? The power was still there, sure, but in the process of keeping it, had the dynasty broken its very soul?